hope everyone is all right. I finally get the opportunity to do Bernie Sanders Town Hall. A few things, just as a few updates. I want to give a shout out to Mrs. Thomas. She held it down. She held down the fort during the Notre Dame fire. I was not here. I had a medical appointment. Also, I want to give a shout out to Fault Lines. So when Julian Assange was arrested, Lee Stranahan from Fault Lines was sent to the UK essentially to report on what was taking place. If you watch Fault Lines, you'll essentially hear what was taking place. Lee was reporting from the UK. He was covering Brexit, but he was also covering Julian Assange. And if I'm not mistaken, all of this was precipitated with Julian Assange. For the last, 2 weeks, Fault Lines has brought me onto the show to do a couple of episodes. So I want to give them a shout out and say thank you. Could never replace Lee on that case. But nevertheless, it was awesome to just kind of sit there and help man the show while he was gone. So there's that. Also, Patron Appreciation Show will be on 1 p.m. on Sunday. That hasn't changed. I think those are all of the updates. Now, Bernie Sanders Town Hall. Now, I couldn't wait for this. I was ecstatic for this. You have no idea. When I heard Bernie Sanders announce that he was going to be on Fox News, there were some Democrats that howled at this. But that's more like people scoffing at the good kid in class. Like, you have honor roll, you have scholar roll, and they're just mad and they're pissy, so they and their friend are going to mock you for your success and you're being just absolutely awesome. That's kind of what they came off. That came off as this kind of mean girl. Or this, I'm trying to think of one that's applicable to men, but at the very, because I guess I feel it's kind of sexist. But you get my point. It came across as you guys couldn't pull this off as well. And you're just angry about it. Me, Sanders supporters, and earnest people in the public who just wants to hear, okay, I'll give him a fair shot. Hell, even Republicans or conservative voters, hell, he's on Fox News. He had the balls to come here. I'd give him a shot. I want him to be earnest with us. I'll give him a shot. I'll give him a fair hearing. And to me, that's music to my ears. He's earnest, and he just tells you what he wants. He's not trying to hide it. He's not trying to hide the ball. This is what I want, and this is why. And I want that message to go to a conservative audience. And even if there's just a small percentage that say, okay, that's not bad, I'll take it. I will take it. So let's go through some of this. I'm not going to go through the entirety of the debate because I don't want them to take my channel down. But there are certain parts of this debate that I definitely want to hit upon, including one section where Bernie Sanders gives the argument for Medicare for all. All the other arguments can sit down and go away. He gives the argument. Like, it's succinct. It's butter on toast. Like, it's just an amazing, extraordinarily well thought out, straightforward argument on why Medicare for all should be the policy for the United States and should be supported uniformly to some degree. Or as uniformly as possible. I think it should be the policy position of the left. So let's start. I'm going to start here, not because I want to start here, but because I'd imagine some people are going to ask this question, and this has been put out in Democratic media. I showed earlier today that the Democratic Party, the established order of what is the Democratic Party, let's say it that way, does not like Sanders, and has put the word out that they need to stop Sanders, and they can't figure out how you stop a 70-something-year-old that can't be bribed or bought, and that they believe, like I believe, has a fair shot at getting to that office, or has a good chance of getting to the office. So they put out the attack dogs. One of those attacks was on Bernie Sanders because he wrote a book and was able to raise $1 million. As if there's something salacious about socialists also just so happening to becoming a millionaire. I don't understand the connection between these things. But I'm going to let Sanders answer this, even though I think this is an utterly absurd proposition to have any feelings about it all. So let's start it. Bernie Sanders, Town Hall. I'm going to slice this video up. So if you're going to see it, you're probably going to see it split up if you don't necessarily see the entirety of the video, because this is probably going to go like an hour. So let's start. Bernie Sanders, Fox News, Let's get rid of the rumble. There's also this awesome element that Fox News is the capitalist emporium of the world, and Bernie Sanders calls himself a socialist. Now, a democratic socialist, so don't misunderstand me, but you get my point. It's this classic, tell me what you stand for. And it's not hiding the ball. It's not pretending to be something that you're not. This is what I am. Take me for what I am. Yes, I believe that everybody should have health care. Yes, I believe that everybody should have access to the education that they need within a society. Yes, I think Social Security should be expanded. Yes, I'm not going to hide the ball. I'm going to tell you exactly what I believe. Let's hear him out. Bernie Sanders, Fox News.
Yay. Joe, what's your question?
Hey, Joe.
Hi, Senator Sanders. Now that your tax returns have been released and you have been identified as a millionaire and in the top 1%, will you pay your fair share? And how do you plan to apply the policies that you have been talking about enforcing on top earners? Thank you, Senator Sanders.
Well, I happen to believe, Joe, that we have an absurd tax system. And while millions of people today are paying actually more in taxes than they anticipated, Amazon, Netflix, and dozens of major corporations as a result.
Is he still an independent? He's not still an independent, is it? Is he? Bernie Sanders, independent senator from Vermont? I don't know if that's right, but maybe. I mean, I don't know if that's right. I need to check that out. I just noticed that. I just have a hard time believing he's still being independent running in the democratic process for president, but it's possible. Let's continue.
Result of Trump's tax bill paid nothing in federal taxes. I think that's a disgrace. So today we announced now you raised the issue, I am a millionaire. Well, actually, this year we had $560,000 in income. And that's a lot of money. And that money, in my case, my wife's case, it came from a book that I wrote. Pretty good book. You might want to read it. It was a bestseller, sold all over the world, and we made money. So if anyone thinks that I should apologize for writing a best-selling book, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do it. But let me reiterate, I voted against. I guess on Fox News you said that I benefited from Trump's tax bill. Did you tell people that I voted against Trump's tax bill?
Sure, but you did benefit from it.
Yeah.
What does it matter if he benefited from it? I don't understand. This is what I mean. I guess I don't understand this argument. I guess this is kind of a feeling-based argument that people feel some kind of way about it. But a socialist writes a book and becomes a millionaire. And that people are raising it up like, ha, the socialist is a millionaire. So what? You act as if it's an insane proposition that people vote against their own self-interest. And if that's the proposition that you guys are putting out, and I'm saying this from the standpoint of Democrats, because Democrats put this out, Fox News started blowing this up. But if you believe that that's the proposition, what does that mean about you? What does it mean about you? Yes, socialists can be a millionaire. And yes, millionaires can vote for policies that are against their self-interest. And in this case, Bernie Sanders has been Bernie Sanders for the past 40 years. And yes, he voted against the tax bill that Donald Trump put out. It doesn't really matter if he benefited from it or not.
But I voted against it. And I happen to believe that a tax bill written and pushed by Trump, who told the American people that that tax bill, some of you may recall, would not benefit the wealthy. You remember that? Oh, it's not going to benefit the wealthy. 83% of the benefits went to the top 1%. So I think that's a bad idea. And in my view, people, whether it's me, you probably make a lot more money than I do. But whether it's me or you or anybody else, I think wealthy people and large corporations that are making billions in profits should start paying their fair share of taxes.
But Senator, to your point, and to Joe's point, your taxes do show that you're a millionaire. You did make $1 million in 2016, 2017. You're right, the 561 in 2018. But your marginal tax rate was 26% because of President Trump's tax cuts. So why not say, you know, I'm leading this revolution. I'm not going to take those.
Come on, we're doing.
this is somewhat of a ridiculous proposition, right? This is completely ludicrous. I mean, it is a very different thing of somebody making, let's say, $1 million and benefiting from a tax bill that they voted against, as opposed to a company like Amazon that makes billions and pays zero taxes. There's a massive difference between those things. Taking this to the level of the individual, when honestly the conversation that is trying to be had is about how the corporate tax structure or how the tax system is rigged in a way that it benefits one at the expense of the other, meaning this kind of exploitive relationship in which cash is funneled from the bottom to the top. That's his point. Bringing this to the level of an individual is somewhat of a red herring, and I don't understand what Bernie Sanders writing a book and getting $1 million has to do with the price of tea in China. So I'm going to move this forward to 9:14 because I have to be honest, this is the question I care about the least on here, but I wanted to give him the opportunity to at the very least answer that question. All right, so this one. Oh, and by the way, part of the other reason that I was ecstatic about Bernie Sanders doing this is because while he's on Fox News, Trump has to defend himself. Meaning anything that you ask Sanders, that question has potential to be turned around, especially if it's something that Sanders just can answer. And is presented the audience of Fox News of saying, look, why do you think this is right? And this is what I want. And which one is in your best interest? I understand your ideology. What's in your best interest? Now, a Democrat, it's hard to make that argument, a typical Democrat. Because for all intents and purposes, you're looking back at their track record and you have to say, okay, we don't believe this party believes this stuff, so I don't believe this guy is going to do this. But as you saw in the beginning of Fox News, they still had Bernie Sanders as an independent. That is going to be a plus in his favor, especially to this audience. So let's hear this question on democratic socialism. I love this question. They asked Bernie Sanders, can you explain democratic socialism in a way that is less threatening to this audience? Because to Fox News credit, it doesn't seem like they stacked the audience. I mean, the Fox News host pushed the conversation in a specific direction, but for all intents and purposes, the town hall was fair. They had people of all stripes in the audience, everything from libertarian to socialist. So they had somewhat of a split. And so I like this idea of, hey, just non-threatening question. Can you just explain your political ideology to this audience? And let me check to make sure I haven't missed anything. All right, good. And, all right, so let's hear it.
It will not.
All right.
All right. You ask me fair questions, I will give you fair answers.
Thank you, sir.
That's the deal.
And you know, not everybody thought that I should come on this show.
And we appreciate it.
All right. Your network does not necessarily have a great deal of respect in my world, but I thought it was important for me to be here and have a serious discussion about serious issues. Sally asked a good question. Thanks for that question, Sally. And let's talk about it. And I think it's an important issue, but it will come up. What is democratic socialism? Yeah. Fair question? Okay. So let's talk about it. Democratic socialism, to me, is creating a government and an economy and a society which works for all rather than just the top 1%. It means ending the absurd inequalities that exist today. And I want to lay this out because you're not going to hear this much on Fox, and you're not going to hear this much in the media in general. And the American people have got to conclude whether we think it is appropriate and what America is about to have 3 families owning more wealth than the bottom half of the American society, 160 million people. Whether it's appropriate for the top 1% to own more wealth than the bottom 92%. Whether it is right that 49% of all new income goes to the top 1%, when many people, Brett and Martha, who are watching this program, are working 2 or 3 jobs just to pay the bills. So first of all, we want to create a government that works for all of us, and we want to create a political system which is based on one person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And furthermore, when I talk, and people have different views of capitalism or democratic socialism, whatever it may be, but this is my view. I believe that human beings, especially in a wealthy, democratic, civilized society like our own, are entitled to certain basic rights. So let me be very clear, and I'm sure we'll discuss it later in the show, Brett. I believe that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. Okay? And I believe that there is something embarrassingly wrong when the United States of America is the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. I live 50 miles from the Canadian border.
We're going to get in detail about Medicare.
Right. So health care is right. I believe that education, whether you're poor, whether you're rich, you have the right to get all of the education you need. And that is why I believe we should make public colleges and universities tuition free.
We're going to talk about all of this.
Good.
And we're going to try to talk about how you pay for it, which is a real question.
Absolutely.
But I just want to, back on the taxes briefly, when you wrote the book and you made the money,
yeah,
isn't that the definition of capitalism, the American dream?
No. I mean, what we want is a country where everybody has opportunity. I have a college degree. I'm a United States Senator. But a lot of people don't have a college degree. A lot of people are not United States Senators. I want everybody in this country to be able to have health care, to have education, to when they turn on the water, have drinkable water, not toxic water. So what we are fighting for, Brett, is a society not where just a few people can make a whole lot of money, but a society where everybody in this country has the opportunity to live in security and dignity.
All right. So this weekend, I'm going to talk a little bit about the field of Democratic candidates who are out there. This weekend, Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, announced that he is also a candidate for the Democratic nominee.
It is what you believe in.
All right, so the other shot was a shot on his age. So again, I don't necessarily give that too much credence. It doesn't matter to me. But this contest is about whether or not the person can do the job or not. And these attacks, on his age are just beyond the pale. Nevertheless, so I'm going to skip past that. And there's a conversation that came up about superdelegates. Oh, superdelegates. That I am interested in.
President Trump has so inflamed the Democratic base that we will shift too far left and overreach like the Republicans did with the Tea Party in 2010. What are your thoughts on that?
Good question.
Let's hear this.
And look, this is what I say every day. I disagree with Donald Trump on virtually every issue, and I talk about it. And I'll tell you what upsets me, but I'll tell you what upsets me the most, and I'm going to answer your question, is that whether you're conservative or moderate or progressive, I don't think the American people are proud that we have a president who is a pathological liar. And I say that, it does not give me pleasure to say that. All right. I disagreed with George W. Bush on almost everything. Bush was not a pathological liar. Trump cannot even tell the truth, even as to where his father was born. It's really that crazy. His father was born in New York. He claims he was born in Germany. But if you can't even tell the truth about where your father was born, it's hard to believe anything that he says. But to answer your question, look, if we spend all of our time attacking Trump, you know what? Democrats are going to lose. All right? Our job is to lay out a vision that makes sense to the working families of this country. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. Over a 4-year period, and the video that you showed earlier, I think, captured that, we raised issues 4 years ago which were thought to be extreme and a little bit out there, but today they're accepted by the American people. So I think you talk to the people of Bethlehem and Burlington, Vermont, you say, what's on your mind? Well, you know what? Among other things, if you work 40 hours a week, people don't want to live in poverty. We've got to raise that minimum wage to a living wage. In my state of Vermont and all over this country, we've got an infrastructure that is falling about, roads and bridges and water systems, wastewater. But we can put 15 million people back to work with $1 trillion investment. Think that makes sense to people? So I agree with you, all right? I mean, I think Trump is a dangerous president, but if all we do is focus on him, we lose. Our job is to develop an agenda that speaks to the needs of workers. When we do that, we're going to win, and win big.
You know, it's funny. I like that answer, even though I don't think it answered the guy's question at all. We went around the guy's question. I could have swore that guy asked about not moving too far to the left in the same way that the Tea Party went. But whether the guy realized it or not, the Tea Party was able to take power in the Republican Party, and you can make an argument, was able to put Trump in that office. I mean, after all, he's not a president in this kind of corporate class, even though he is, if that makes sense. I mean, it's almost like he's from a different class of the party of sorts. But you get my point, they won. I understand these guys were insane, but the left is not that way. Like, there's the comparison just doesn't fly between the two. It's a good answer. It's always funny, this two-step. I'm going to hit Trump as really hard as I possibly can. The Trump is a habitual liar, and it gives me no pleasure at all to say that. No pleasure at all. But if we continuously hit Trump, we lose. I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. But he is right on the second point, though. Look, this idea of moving too far to the left, it's hard to know what that means. For the most part, the stuff that he was pushing in the last term, they consider that fringe. At this point, this is considered mainstream. Now, if you're asking people just basic things like, look, there are things that we can agree upon. Should you get higher wages? Most people would say, yes, I can agree that I should be making higher wages. So fair enough. Do you believe that you should drink clean water? Meaning, do you believe that your kid and every other kid in this country, regardless of where they are, should be able to get clean water? Yes, I think people should be able to get clean water. There are things that we can agree upon. What about clean air? What about having an environment in the first place? Or having an environment that's, let's say, clean in the first place? His point is there are things that we can agree upon. And all those things that we can agree upon, we should move forward on those things. Should people get health care? I think that answer is a yes. An overwhelming majority of Democrats think yes. The majority of the population says yes. There are things that we can agree upon that we can move forward on. This idea of moving too far to the left, Sanders is giving you this platform. Accept him or don't. But I don't necessarily think he directly answered that question, even though I think he hit it in an indirect way. So let's keep going. The one that I wanted to go to was 20 and 4. Let's see what else is here.
Senator, it looks like, nobody knows for sure, but it looks like Vice President Joe Biden is likely to get.
Secretary Clinton had 500 superdelegates lined up behind her, insiders and campaign.
With so many candidates on the Democratic side, it's possible that some
Secretary Clinton has come a long way since then.
Establishment candidates.
All right. This one is a great question. And this is one of those questions that you're only going to get on Fox. I could be wrong on this, but this is one of those questions you would never in a billion years get on MSNBC. At least I don't think you would. Superdelegates. Now, you must understand here, this is why this town hall debate is also awesome, because there's politics going on even in the conversation. Fox News is clearly in the tank for the Republican Party. They can't come across as being overly, gross, because they still have to have this kind of facade of being a news organization. So this has to be somewhat on the level in regards to them having this platform, even though it's going to be to the right in the way they project the world, their worldview. But any opportunity that's available to get a dig and to stick your fingernail and just pry a little bit within what's going on within the Democratic Party, they're going to take their shots. Well, this is one of those shots that is just a damn good question any way you cut it, even though this is not probably a question you get on MSNBC. Superdelegates. Why do you believe the Democratic Party won't screw you again? They screwed you the first time around. Why don't you think they're going to do it again? You have all those superdelegates lined up. Those superdelegates haven't gone anywhere, Mr. Sanders. So, what are you going to do about it? And why do you think it's going to? Do you think it's going to be on the level? Let's see the question. I love this question. Great question, shiny human beings at Fox News.
Candidate, he's obviously been around for a long time. Are you worried that the DNC might put its finger on the scale again, the way that they did to you back in 2016 with Hillary Clinton?
Well, you're right. We went through that in 2016.
Yeah.
And I think we have come a long way since then. So we speak to the DNC every week. And I think the process will be fair. One of the important changes that
By the way, just so we're clear, the issue here is not just the DNC. Let's be very clear. It's DNC and vestiges of the DNC and these like non-profits. They have these arms, like Center for American Progress. These things that pretend to be some kind of neutral within the party itself, but aren't neutral by any stretch of the imagination. You're talking about journalists, MSNBC, places like that, that fired Ed Schultz because Ed Schultz was trying to cover Sanders. It's not just the Democratic Party in and of itself. It's also the Democratic Party and the way that politics colludes and intermingles with media. Do you remember in some of the WikiLeaks documents, there were calls of saying how people would befriend Sanders and then turn and change at the end to try to bring Sanders supporters over to the sides? This is the level of politics that these guys were using. Even media, the thing that is supposed to shape the reality of individuals itself, was being shaped by political or economic whims. It's not just the DNC. I'm not saying Sanders doesn't know this, but it's not just the DNC. Let's rewind this question. Let's hear it one more time. Where is it? All right, let's start right here.
And I think we have come a long way since then. So we speak to the DNC every week. And I think the process will be fair. One of the important changes that we made, and we won, is, as you will recall, both of you recall, in the last time around, in 2016, Secretary Clinton had 500 superdelegates lined up behind her before the first vote was cast in Iowa. And that seemed to me pretty dumb and unfair. Well, that process has been changed. And I think that works well for everybody.
But let me ask you, just because now the process is that in the next round, the superdelegates would come into play. And with so many candidates on the Democratic side, it's possible that somebody doesn't get 50%. Yeah. Are you concerned about it? Are you talking to the DNC about that?
Well, that's what the rule is. I mean, that's where we are right now. But you're right. I mean, I would hope that the Democratic Party understands what they did some years ago. And that is, what we want to hear from is not political insiders and campaign contributors. You want to hear from ordinary people in Iowa and Pennsylvania, and they should determine who the next Democratic nominee will be.
Okay, let's go to another question. Jordan is a student from
Bernie Sanders, if you remember, I think it was yesterday, put a letter on the door of American Progress, Center for American Progress, and its campaign arm, I guess you can say it's political active arm, and kind of made this point that, look, cut off the shenanigans in attacking lefties. Now, I strongly suspect that that was more along the lines of stop attacking me, especially since we're trying to have a campaign of ideas. But stop attacking me looks a little bit not as good as stop attacking us, lumping Elizabeth Warren and laughably Cory Booker into this process. So he knows that it's not just them. He knows they're more enemies than just the Democratic Party per se. But it's kind of sad that that he's fighting the Democratic Party that he's running in. So let's keep going. There's another one on Medicare for all, and this is the best. Of all the arguments for Medicare for all, this is perhaps the best argument I've ever heard for Medicare for all. I don't think I'm hyping this up. I listened to this twice before, so hopefully the third time I listen to this is not going to be like, oh, wait a minute, that's not what I thought it was. So I think that should be the very next question. So let's hear it.
From Scotch Plains. He has the next question.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for being here. My question is, why do you believe that the government can provide better health care than the private sector? And why should people who like their plans be forced to switch?
Okay.
I hate questions like this because it built into the question is a fundamental misunderstanding of what's being said. Why do you think the government can provide? The government is not providing anything other than an insurance plan. It's the difference between your insurance, meaning whatever you have in your wallet now, and another insurance that the government essentially is taking over. Your insurance provider leaves, and the government does what they were doing at a cheaper price when you getting expanded services. In addition to having another 20 or 30 million of your fellow Americans being able to get health care, and you paying less for your health care, but paying for it in other ways other than point of service. That's what we're talking about. This is not a government takeover of healthcare. You're choosing your doctors. Your doctors are not going to be like middlemen. But let's hear Sanders answer this. It's just slightly aggravating. I've heard this. This is not the first or the second or the third time I've heard this fundamental misunderstanding of what is being proposed.
For being here. My question is, why do you believe that the government can provide better health care than the private sector, and why should people who like their plans be forced to switch?
Okay. First of all, let's be clear what we mean by Medicare for all. Okay? Medicare is a government-run program for seniors, which is widely popular and quite effective. In 1965, when Lyndon Johnson passed that bill, it was called by some Republicans socialism and everything else. But you go to the average senior and you say, how do you feel about Medicare? And they will tell you that they will oppose any Republican effort to cut Medicare. And by the way, in Trump's budget, he has proposed an $845 billion cut over a 10-year period to Medicare, which seniors don't want. So to answer your question, we are not talking about government-run healthcare. The Veterans Administration, and most veterans think that that's a pretty good healthcare system. Talk to the American Legion and the VFW. They strongly defend the veterans' healthcare. That's government-run. What we are talking about is simply a single-payer insurance program, which means that you will have a card which says Medicare on it. You'll go to any doctor that you want. You'll go to any hospital that you want. And by the way, millions of people today are in networks which prevent them from doing this. So this gives you freedom of choice with regard to the doctors you go to or the hospitals you go to. But here is the main point when we talk about healthcare. Currently, right now, we got 30 million people, zero health insurance, and many of you and tens of millions of Americans are underinsured with high deductibles and co-payments. Is that correct? Yes. All right. So what happens is there are estimates that some 30,000 Americans die every single year because they don't go to the doctor when they should. All right. Meanwhile, we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. 1 out of 5 Americans are getting ripped off by the drug companies who make billions in profits while charging us the highest prices in the world. And on top of all of that, we spend twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other nation. So the question that I throw back to you, do you think it makes sense to spend twice as much per capita as the people of any other nation and be the only country in the world not to guarantee healthcare to all people?
This audience has a lot of Democrats in it. It has Republicans, independents, Democratic socialists, conservatives. I want to ask the audience a question. If you could raise your hand here, a show of hands of how many people get their insurance from work, private insurance right now. How many get it from private insurance? Okay, now of those, how many are willing to transition to what the senator says, a government-run system? There's 180 million people on private insurance.
All right, let's deal with that, Brett.
And
fair question.
They would be lost, right?
Well,
to your
Brett,
system.
Fair
Okay.
question.
Okay.
Good question.
Good, thank
and
you.
I know it's
You know, this is somewhat of a fear tactic to some degree. When I was at my other position, when I was at my last job, every year we change insurance plans. Every year the company would go out to try to find the cheapest plan that they could find for the employees, meaning how cheap can we get this? And they would offer those to the employees. Every year they switch their plans. Every year we got a different card. Even my wife, the company that my wife works for, her and I have the same insurance policy. Every year, health insurance. Again, year after year, they changed. It is a pain in my ass when they do so, but they do so every year. What Sanders is talking about is a certain degree of stability because those plans wouldn't change anymore. Ultimately, think of it as we're changing healthcare plans with expanded coverage, free at the point of service. Yes, your taxes will go up to cover it, but free at the point of service. Let's let Sanders finish.
What the right wing throws out, so let me answer it, all right? Millions of people every single year lose their health insurance. You know why? They get fired or they quit and they go to another employer. I was a mayor for 8 years. You know what I did? What probably every mayor in America does? Is you look around for the best insurance program, the most cost-effective insurance. You change insurance. Every year, millions of workers wake up in the morning and their employer has changed the insurance that they have. Maybe they like the doctors. People are nodding their heads. Okay, so this is not new. Every year. Now, what we're talking about actually is stability. That when you have a Medicare for all, it is there now and will be there in the future.
Senator, let me ask you a question about Vermont, because Vermont tried to have a single-payer program, and in 2014, the Democratic governor abandoned it because he had to raise income taxes, had to raise payroll taxes, and the people of Vermont didn't want their taxes to go up.
No, it's not quite true.
And they abandoned the program. So if you work in
you're getting
Vermont,
into internal Vermont politics, of which I know a little bit.
Well, I'm sure you do.
I don't want to be here. All right, the governor did a rather poor job, but I think if you look at polling, especially among Democrats, as I'm sure you have, you tell me, strong majority of Democrats and more than a few Republicans want to see a Medicare for all program. What the opponents, and let's be clear about this, Martha. When you are dealing with healthcare, which is, 18% of our GDP? I mean, we're talking about $3.5 trillion a year. And you have insurance companies that make billions and billions of dollars in profit. Let me give you an example, if I might, of the dysfunctionality of the current healthcare system. Recently, Aetna merged with CVS. You may recall that. Big merger, which in my view will drive healthcare costs up. The gentleman who was head of Aetna's named Mr. Bertolini. You know what he got for putting together that merger? He got a $500 million bonus. Do you think that's how we should spend healthcare dollars?
I mean, I think everybody is in agreement that healthcare needs to be fixed in this country. The question is how. And my question to you was, it will drive up taxes to pay for healthcare, and not just the wealthy will pay for that. The middle class will also pay for it.
Very good.
So how do you justify it? And
all right, Martha, what are you not including in your discussion?
You tell me.
I will tell you. You're not going to pay any health insurance premiums. But look, Martha,
whether it's in your income tax or your payroll tax, you're going to pay.
Look, healthcare is not free. You never heard me suggest that we're going to magically...
You just said it was going to be free for everyone.
It's going to be free at the point of when you use it, okay? And you go to... Why are you so shocked by this?
Because someone's going to pay.
Somebody is going to pay.
Who are they? Who pays?
Okay. One second.
Okay,
Relax.
I'm just asking.
We'll be talking.
Please.
We'll get through this together.
It's a common question.
Okay.
We had so many email questions.
Okay.
Ask Senator Sanders how he is
Fair
going
enough.
to pay.
I got it.
It's a fair
But
question.
the first thing, let's just say hypothetically.
Okay.
You are self-employed, and you've got a husband and 2 kids, okay? Family of 4. Do you know how much that family is paying today for health care?
Tell me.
$28,000 a year.
Okay.
All right, we're spending $11,000 per person. We are saying to that family of 4, you ain't going to pay that $28,000. You're not paying any more premiums. You're not paying any more co-payments. You're not paying any more deductibles. How's that? $28,000 you're not paying. But does that mean you're not going to pay something? Of course it does. You're going to pay more in taxes.
And do members of Congress who now have gold-plated health insurance...
No, we don't.
Well, they have a special plan that's outside Obamacare. A different plan. Do members of Congress, are they going to do that transition as well?
Damn right. Of course. Of course. Why would you suggest otherwise? But I want to make the point. I want to get back to the point that Martha raised. Look, healthcare costs money. Every other country, or virtually every country, does it in the same way we do education for our kids. Okay, when a kid walks into school, kid doesn't have to take out a credit card, right? It's paid for out of public funds. That's what most countries do. So if you're asking me, if your question is a fair question, are people going to pay more in taxes? Yes. But at the end of the day, the overwhelming majority of people are going to end up paying less for health care because they're not paying premiums, co-payments, and deductibles.
Yes. Yes. Like, this is why I love... You have no idea how much I love the start of Sanders going on Fox News, because I knew arguments like this was going to take place. If you want Medicare for all explained, go to the socialists and allow him to make the pitch for the thing that he has been pushing for God knows how long. That is an amazing case for Medicare for all that Bernie Sanders has just made. And doing so on Fox News, with Fox News hosts skeptically pushing back on him. He's like, why are you so shocked by this? We do this for education. Why does this astonish you so? You act as if this has never taken place, or that this has never taken place anywhere. God, I love that. I love that. I love that. I love that. You have no idea how much I love that. You have no idea. You have no idea. Let's see. I'm not even going to sleep thanks to this, but it's so worth it. What? Bernie should be talking to Nancy Pelosi, not Fox News, but Bernie won't dare fight Nancy Pelosi. Bernie is a fraud. Fight Nancy Pelosi on what? What is he fighting her on? They're not even in the same branch of government. I mean, they're in the same... Bernie Sanders is in the Senate, and he's running for president. Nancy Pelosi is in the House. Bob Ramirez, I agree with Sanders in principle on many of these issues. I don't trust him to follow through with it for 1 minute. That's the catch. That's the catch. Kamshwari Kate. What's happening, Kate? Kim Shwari. What's happening, Kim Shwari? And Pat Hacker. Happy birthday, Pat. Pat Hacker. Happy birthday, man. Before Reagan was governing California, we had state and county hospitals who charged based on the ability to pay. Since Reagan in my area, all we have are Catholic for-profit hospitals. Yeah. Nancy Pelosi's face is like that scene in Clockwork Orange when the guy's eyes are pried open. Oh, God. Creative experiments. Jamal, do you even see how evil Bernie is? Bernie is taking his time to convince Republicans. Bernie won't spend a single minute to fight Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton to get it passed. Well, Come on. Come on. Are you serious? Are you serious? For one, Bernie Sanders and Nancy Pelosi are not even in the same area of government. Nancy Pelosi is in the House. Bernie Sanders is in the Senate. That's the first point. Second point. Bernie Sanders is trying to run a campaign for president of the United States. Any and everything that Bernie Sanders says in regards to, I guess, picking a fight with Pelosi, is going to be used against him when he runs for presidency of the United States. Maybe, regardless of what Bernie Sanders thinks, it's not in his right responsibility at this very moment to go picking fights with Nancy Pelosi. At least I don't think so, not politically. I think your question gets to, if Bernie Sanders is president of the United States, would that one Bernie Sanders be pushing Nancy Pelosi to push those policies? I think under those circumstances, yes, he would push Nancy Pelosi to push those policies, because at that point, she would be the thing that would be stopping him, not, in this case, the Republican Party, if that makes sense. What he needs to do in the various situations are different. The incentive structures built into those things are different. We're not at a position where he's trying to attack or get Nancy Pelosi in a cage match. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Rodriguez. Bro, it's good to have a channel that's not all about race. Too many on the left and right just focus on that. I hate it. You talk about real things, you don't care about race, except in cases of actual racism. It's so refreshing. You're a good guy. Platform ID Grandpa. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. My reasoning is straightforward. I tend to think that most of our issues are not issues of race, but are issues of class. Within the context of issues of class, you do get issues of race, but those things to some degree are linked to one another. One of the parties, the Democratic Party, has a tendency to focus on identity to the exception of everything else. But I think they do this for political reasons. It's this, this patina of race on the person. So somebody who's black tries to get across that because they're black, they're somehow going to understand your issues. When really, their attentiveness is really, if people were focusing on it, it's class. 99% of us, you can have people who are part of it that hate my guts. But at the very end of the day, from a financial and economic standpoint, we're in the same boat. So, yeah, I think it's important to defend it. So when they're going after Ilhan for being, for Islamic, or they're, these kind of Islamic phobic attacks on it, then yeah, in almost solidarity, you have to stand with that person, because we don't necessarily overly focus on race or identity doesn't mean you let it go to the wayside or you lose the hegemonic advantage that those things or attacking those things are wrong. But I think a heavy attentiveness needs to be focused on class, and we can stand in solidarity on that point. So thank you, man. I appreciate it. Let's see. So let's go to the second one. Part 2, Townhall, Bernie Sanders, Fox News. I don't know if they continued this. For some reason, I don't have. Yeah, let's see.
Townhall with Senator Bernie Sanders.
Let's take some more questions from our audience.
All right, so we're going to go to Rodney.
All right, so they finished the Medicare for All thing. I have others listed, but I don't have which ones. I don't have it. I don't have the number that's associated with it. So let's just go with the video. We'll see it from here. I remember most of this, but still, let's see it. This is not one of those videos where we're watching it at the same time. I've already watched this video, but I don't remember which part in the second video.
Rodney, are you up? Hi, Rodney.
Hi.
What's your question for Senator Sanders?
Thank you. My question
Got the hippies
for
in the
Senator
house.
Sanders here is, how would you bring back jobs in industry like Bethlehem Steel that have been lost due to, in part, trade deals that don't favor the American working class?
Hey, Rodney, that's a great question.
Oh God, I don't know why that trips me out. It's not the question that he asked, so don't misunderstand me. This is far more insignificant than that. Like, it's far more trivial. He looks like he's tweaking out or something. I could be wrong. And I know it's just because he's kind of disheveled and he's kind of got the, he just seems somewhat out of place with the audience. But nevertheless, tech support, Rodney, I strongly suspect this is going to be a Bernie voter, but let's hear him out.
In part, trade deals that don't favor the American working class.
Hey, Rodney, that's a great question. You are looking at a former congressman and a senator who not only voted against NAFTA, walked the picket lines with union workers to see that, voted against CAFTA, voted against permanent normal trade relations with China, strongly opposed the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And why did I oppose all of these disastrous trade agreements? It was very clear to me that these agreements under Democratic and Republican leadership was written by multinational corporations to make these corporations even wealthier at the expense of the American worker. So let me suggest what is not a radical idea. American workers should not have to compete against desperate people around the world who are making $1 or $2 an hour. Now, I think we have a moral responsibility to lift up poor people around the world along with the rest of the wealthy countries. But you can do that without engaging in a race to the bottom. I have heard from, I've got a 100% lifetime pro-union voting work, and I'm very close to the unions. And I talk to union workers, and they say, our boss has said that if you don't take a pay cut, you don't take a cut in health care, we're going to move to Mexico, we're going to move to China, where people are prepared to work for almost nothing. So trade is a good thing, but we need a trade policy that works for working families and not just for the large corporations.
All right, so you just saw in Peter Ducey's
That doesn't really answer his question, though. His thing was, how do you bring jobs back? Saying that we need better trade policies doesn't really answer the question, how do you bring jobs back? That's not really an easy question either, to some degree. What Sanders might have should have went into this thing of the Green New Deal, and he's already said $1 trillion investment. I think he mentioned that earlier in the debate. So those are things that he wants to push forward, and he's mentioned those policies once before. As for the Green New Deal stuff, so the Green New Deal is a grab bag of essentially all lefties issues stuffed into one kind of package. But taking out some of the extraneous stuff and go just basic with this idea of dealing with issues of climate, then right off the bat, you can see how this kind of new capitalistic expansion in the area of trying to fix something that had fucked up in the first place, meaning our environmental space. He didn't answer the question directly, but he's answered this question throughout the debate. As for the trade deals, it's hard to know what he's going to do with those, if he can do anything about it in the first place. Is he going to unilaterally get rid of those trade deals? I have a hard time believing that Bernie Sanders is going to do that. But we'll see. I don't necessarily think this was a full-throated answer of this question, but I could be wrong. It's just how it came across. But let's continue.
Package, there are people saying that they think the economy is doing pretty well here. So in Pennsylvania, you've got unemployment is down over the past couple of years. Wages are up 6.6%. So how do you convince those people in this area who I know you'd like to win over this time around that they should, sort of change horses and go with you when things are going well?
Okay, well, that's a fair question. And let's look what's going on, not only in the United States, around the world. I know Donald Trump will tell you that he is responsible for the relatively low unemployment which we currently experience. Well, guess what? In 2010, at the heart of the Wall Street crash, unemployment in America was 10%. You remember that. Yep. By the time Obama left office, it was 4.5%. Okay? So it's gone down. And in the last 2.5 years under Trump, it has gone down again. Where are we at 3.5% now? That's good. Okay, but there's been a steady decline. Do you know what unemployment is in Germany now? 3.1%. In Japan, it's 2.8%. In the UK, it's a hair higher than us. In other words, the entire global economy, thank God, is bouncing back for the terrible, terrible Wall Street disaster that cost so many jobs and caused so much suffering in this country. Okay?
And you said that has nothing to do with the Trump.
Certainly not. What I'm suggesting to you is the facts are very clear, is that in Japan, in Germany, United Kingdom, all over the world, thank God, it's a good thing, the global economy is coming back and unemployment is relatively low. Now, I know Trump will give a slightly different spin on it. But in the midst of all of this, in the current economy today, while unemployment is low, and we're all delighted by that, what you have is that most of the new income and wealth continues to go to the very, very wealthy. You have a situation now where 7 million more people lack health insurance that used to have it. And you still have a situation where in states all over this country, and it's hard for me to believe this, but it's true, you got people still working for $7.50, $8 an hour because Trump and Republicans refused to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. So to answer your question, the economy today is good, thank God, but you got tens of millions of workers still struggling to put food on the table. And we've got to address their needs as part of the debate.
Let me ask you just quickly, if you raise taxes on corporations, which I know you weren't happy with the tax cuts for corporations, aren't you afraid that that is going to chill employment, that those companies are going to say, you know what, we have 100 employees, we could do it with 50, or we can do it with 60. We're not going to pay these higher taxes. We're not going to.
That's utterly ludicrous. If a company could cut a worker, they'd cut a worker. No company in their right mind brings somebody on just for shits and giggles. I'm just going to bring this guy on just because, even though I could be making more money right now by doing this particular job without him. Let Sanders answer this, but nonsense questions.
Isn't that
if
concern?
you want to defend, I mean, I think we look at the world a little bit differently. But if you want to defend a tax system in which Amazon, owned by the wealthiest person in this country, pays zero in federal taxes.
I don't think anybody thinks that's fair.
Okay, good.
But I'm saying if you raise taxes on companies, small businesses across the country,
Well,
are you worried that they will employ fewer people?
Tax policy is complicated, and you got to do it right. You didn't hear me say we're going to raise taxes on small business, did you? What we are talking about is raising taxes on large, profitable corporations and on the wealthiest people in this country. And I think that that is just.
Senator.
Good answer. This is God, I love this. This is why I love this. I mean, it gives him the opportunity to make his case to an entirely different audience, or an audience that may, under normal circumstances, turn him off. Now, they may disagree with some of what Sanders says, but he's being earnest. He's not like, I'm trying to do this while pretending to do. No. The stuff that's so radical that Democrats are supposed to be hiding. Sanders just says, look, this is what I want to do. And this idea of cutting employment. And look, he even makes the point of saying, look, you have to do it right. Now, his point is, you may not raise the minimum wage to $50 an hour, but maybe between where it is now and $50 an hour, there's a sweet spot where people don't necessarily start bleeding off employees while simultaneously people getting a better and decent wage. And like you said, he never said anything about raising taxes on small businesses. So let's let them keep going. I like where this is going.
You look at the list. You're for the Green New Deal and different policies within it, but you're for it generally. We talked about Medicare for all.
Can we talk about?
Yeah, we will. Free college tuition.
Yep.
You have an infrastructure plan.
Yep.
We have a shot of the current national debt clock. It stands at more than $22 trillion tonight, and as we're talking here, it is ticking up. You've talked about ways to pay for your plan.
Uh-oh, here we go. All right, socialists, how are you going to pay for it? Isn't this the question that everyone came? It's like if this was a contest, the entire world comes and looks at this very specific moment, God himself waiting to hear what the socialists are going to say. How do you pay for it? How do you pay for it? I got to be honest, I'm always enamored by this question myself. All right, Bernie Sanders. Here's the national debt. You want to do a Green New Deal, you want to do healthcare, you want to do all of this stuff. And I agree with you. In a perfect world, everybody would have those things, including unicorns and ponies. But we don't live in a perfect ideal world. So, with the debt, what it is, how do you pay for the policies that you're telling the public that you're trying to espouse?
Plans, but there is a lot of doubt that your plans might actually speed up that clock dramatically. So when you look at that, do you not care about that anymore?
I think you're asking the wrong guy. Maybe it's the president you might want to ask. But, Brett, in all due respect,
Sure.
Trump gave $1.5 trillion tax break to the top 1% and large profitable corporations. And I find it so ironic that my Republican colleagues in the Senate who talk all the time about the debt. They don't have a word to say about that.
No,
okay.
we've done many stories about it.
Okay, that's not a criticism, but what I am saying is that
I'm asking you.
Yeah, in fact, I am concerned about the debt. That's a legitimate concern. Every American should be concerned about it. That's not something we should be leaving to our kids and our grandchildren. But we pay for what we are proposing. In terms of Medicare for all, we are paying for that by eliminating, as I said before, deductibles and premiums. We're going to save the average family money. When we're paying twice as much as other countries, we're going to save money on healthcare. I talked about a tax on Wall Street speculation that will help us make colleges, public colleges and universities tuition free. We have a tax plan to raise the $1 trillion we need over a 10-year period to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. So I think you're talking to the wrong guy. We pay for what we are proposing, unlike the President of the United States.
Yes, love that. Because that's always the question that you're hit with, right? Oh, we can't afford that. We can't afford to pay for that. We can't afford nice things. We can't afford to have health care. We can't afford to make sure our seniors are okay in their old age. We can't afford to make sure that the people in our country have the basic necessities of life. We can't afford nice things. And Sanders is like, you're talking to the wrong person. You're talking to the wrong party in this case. I am paying for everything that I am proposing, while the president has put a tax cut that is for the most part going to put trillions of dollars on the backs of the American public itself. Mind you, while giving the overwhelming majority, 83% of that, to the top 1%. You're talking to the wrong person. I love that answer. And what's his name? Bear. He's like, what? He's taken aback by this. It's like, no, sir, we've done shows on that talking about the debt and the Republicans. Sure you have. I'm not saying you haven't, but sure you have.
We have another audience question. Amy is a therapist from South Whitehall Township. Amy, what's your question?
There she is.
Hi, I work as a therapist specifically with people struggling with opioid addiction. Pennsylvania is currently 4th in the nation for opioid overdose deaths, which amounts to 15 people a day in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
There are bipartisan independent groups who have looked at those plans and say it just doesn't add up. What do you say to them?
We disagree. And sometimes these plans done by think tanks, check out who funds the think tanks. Yes. Look, million people struggling with student debt. You really think that we cannot do better? It should be having the highest rate of childhood poverty with addiction in a serious way, and the doctors refer to as diseases of this.
Okay, this is the question of opioid addiction. I care about this, but I care about other stuff in this particular one more. But he gets into other stuff with this, so I might have to show this. Yeah, I'll start it from here. Chris Hedges talks about this kind of diseases of despair. Let's let him make his case.
Despair. When people are giving up on life, that's what happens. So what we need to do is to make sure that we have the treatment capabilities, which most states don't have. Actually, Vermont's doing fairly well in that. That means if you want to get off of that addiction, there is a place for you to go. It's difficult, it's tough stuff, but we have to deal with addiction in a serious way and invest in treatment for those who are addicted.
For all of these plans, you say there are enough taxes to raise to pay for all of the plans.
Yes.
There are bipartisan independent groups who have looked at those plans and say it just doesn't add up. Well, what do you say to them?
We disagree. And sometimes these plans done by think tanks, check out who funds the think tanks. Yes. Okay. Look, Brett, here is the issue that we have to deal with. Let me just bring it down to a human level. We're the wealthiest country in the history of the world. That's where we are right now. Do you think we should be having the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major nation on earth? We got some moms here who are spending $15,000, $20,000 a year trying to find quality child care for their kids. We probably have a child care system which is more dysfunctional than almost any other country on earth. Well, we all know that 0 through 4 are the most important years. You got hundreds of thousands of bright young people in America today, the wealthiest country in the world. They can't afford to go to college. And you got 40 million people struggling with student debt. You really think that we cannot do better as a nation? And on top of that, you got a handful of people who own more wealth than the bottom half of the American society. Now, I understand that we're taking on corporate America, we're taking on the Republicans, we're taking on the Democratic establishment, taking on the drug companies, taking on the insurance companies, taking on the military-industrial complex. You know what? Okay? It ain't easy. I know that. But I think what the American people know, the American people, I think, are ready to deal with justice in America. That's what we're fighting for. And that's economic justice, social justice, environmental justice, racial justice. Okay?
All right. We want to get to some questions about.
Sorry, Martha,
okay. We want to get to some questions about immigration.
I'm sorry, immigration.
He said, are there enough taxes to pay for it all? One last point about the tax thing, or the healthcare thing. They asked him about Vermont and, saying, hey, it failed in Vermont. Vermont is a state. I've kind of made this point before, that it is far more difficult to pull off something like this in a state than it is in a federal program. States have to balance their budgets. The federal government is not. It's a difference in those things. We can pay for it. The only place where you can get dollars is from essentially the U.S. government. This notion that the richest country on the planet can't necessarily afford to ensure people can afford the things that they need is nonsense. Utter nonsense. Let's let them keep going. Just want to make sure I haven't missed any super chats or anything. All right, and one more. All right, let's keep going. Immigration. All right, let's hear the immigration. I mean, I don't know what Sanders can say on immigration. I mean, he's going to attack Donald Trump saying, but let's
let's talk a little bit about the border. The president, as you know, has said that the capacity for the asylum seekers that were full at the border in terms of housing, and it's overflowing. Yes. It's a bad, untenable situation right now. He has suggested, and it's been very controversial over the past few days, sending some of those people to sanctuary cities, which have said in the past that they have opened doors for immigrants. By
the way, this notion, if indeed there is a crisis at the border, if indeed there are a lot of people at the border that need attention, we don't have enough judges, the solution to this seems to be just straightforward and get more judges. The government has the capacity to hire additional judges, get more judges, and hire them at the border. This notion of shutting down the border or dumping people off in sanctuary cities is utter nonsense. This is what I mean. Like, some of this stuff is not serious issues. There are people dealing with real significant problems. You can even say crisis within the context of the country. And they're looking for some level of political thing to at the very least, get across basic idea that somebody is paying attention, or at the very least astute to their issues. Sanders, in many respects, sometimes has a fight to get this injected into the politics or into the discussions in politics. And you can kind of see this here with Fox News. But I think he does it well. Let's hear him answer this question on immigration. I don't want to step on him, even though I know I just did exactly that.
So where do the overflow that we have no capacity for, where do you think they should go?
Well, first thought, I mean, this president, well, let me get into this right. I talked enough about it. But we have a problem at the border, serious problem. And what is the problem? The problem right now, and you correct me if you think I'm wrong, is that we are now seeing desperate people fleeing violence and misery in Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, with little children walking 1,000 miles. They're not trying to sneak in, correct me if I'm wrong, they're going up and they say, we want asylum, because I don't want my little girl to grow up, to be treated horribly by gangs, okay? Now, you're right, there are a whole lot of people. So what do we need to do? We need sensible immigration reform, which includes, among other things, getting hundreds of new judges, because the system is now overflowing, who can deal with these issues. You're coming into the country, are you really fleeing violence, or is another reason? Right. Okay, so you need to have many, many more judges to expedite the process.
And new asylum laws?
Pardon me?
New asylum laws?
Let's look. But historically, from an international and national perspective, and I speak as the son of an immigrant himself, not in this kind of position, but who came to this country at the age of 17 from Poland without a nickel in his pocket. Internationally, what the world has said is that if you are fleeing violence, if your life is in danger, that other countries should welcome you in. But we need real comprehensive immigration reform. We don't need, and let me say this very clearly, we don't need to demonize immigrants. That we don't need to do.
But let me ask you to answer my question, which is, right now, if you were the president of the United States, we have overflowing facilities. They need to go somewhere because they're in that asylum process.
What about building?
Where would you put them?
What about building proper facilities for them right now?
Where?
That could be done right on the border. Right on the border at the same time.
So the people who live on the border should have more facilities in their states, but sanctuary cities which have said they're open to accepting people should not take more.
Now, this is a political act on the president.
It's a real question. That's a real question.
No, it's not a real question.
Yes, it is.
It's a political decision. So what you want to do, let's talk about immigration, which is a real issue. Okay. First of all, instead of demonizing immigrants,
Nobody's
Maybe,
demonizing.
well, I'm saying you are, but we have a president who certainly does every single day. What we need is comprehensive immigration reform. That's what the American people want. And if we had a president who believed in that, we could actually do it. What you also want to do,
Both parties need to agree on it.
you got today 1 point, Trump ended the DACA program that Obama established. You know what that means? That means every day more and more young people who were raised in the United States from 2 or 3 years of age, they're in the military, they are teachers. They're working all over this country. They are now scared to death that somebody's going to pick them up and throw them out of the country. And that is what Trump did. We need to provide legal status to those people. And we need a humane... Look, Martha, I'm not saying this is an easy issue, but let's not politicize it. What we need, as I said, we need the proper legal processes at the border so that these issues can be adjudicated to determine whether or not people should be entitled to asylum.
And you didn't talk about a wall or security there, but you've talked about that before.
We need border security. Of course we do. Who argues with that? That goes without saying. Now, I happen to believe that there are more cost-effective ways to do that than simply building a...
All right, let's go back to the audience.
Didn't run from the question, asked, answered. That I love. Like, look, you can disagree with me. I mean, this is politics, right? I mean, this is my particular perspective of things. You're going to give me your perspective of things. You can totally disagree with me, but I'm being honest with you and getting it across and giving you an intelligent perspective. Now, to be honest and to be fair, electoral reform or reform of the border doesn't really mean anything. I mean, that can mean some of anything. Paul Ryan or any Republican can come up and say the exact same thing from the standpoint of we need massive reform of our border security and so forth. But he did get specific, saying, look, you need to deal with the overflow, you need to hire more judges, but you can do that in an intelligent way as opposed to demonizing the individuals who are coming here. Ask, answer. Love it. They're going to get to a question on Ilhan. I think that's the question that's coming up next. And let me make sure. All right. Good. Let's hear the one on Ilhan. At least I think that's the one coming up next. Let's see.
Tony is a real estate agent from Copley, Pennsylvania, has our next question. Tony?
Senator Sanders, good luck in your campaign.
Thank you.
As a Syrian American, I want to be assured our country isn't going to partake in any foreign affairs that don't directly affect our national security. I believe we need to stay out of Syria, Venezuela, and other countries that have their own personal issues. Do you wholeheartedly agree with this sentiment, or are you going to become another cog in the war machine?
Well, Tony, thank you. That's an excellent question. And, we don't, as a nation, we don't discuss foreign affairs quite as much as we should. Tony, you're looking at a guy who, once again, not only voted against the war in Iraq, I helped lead the opposition to the war in Iraq. And if you go back to YouTube, and what I said then is that wars have unintended consequences, whether it was the tragedy of Vietnam, where so many people in my generation are still suffering as a result of that, people sleeping out on the streets. And by the way, we have got to make sure that no veteran in this country sleeps out in the street. But let me just say this. This is, in a sense, good news, and I know you guys know this, that in the last month, I led the effort along with Senator Mike Lee, who was a conservative from Utah. Mike and I led the effort in the Senate, and some really great people in a bipartisan way led it in the House. And what we said is we think that the United States should get out of the Saudi-led war in Yemen. And for the first time since the War Powers Act was passed 45 years ago, we succeeded in the House and the Senate. And let me say this in a very serious way. I've been critical of the president all night, but let me just say this. The president has said that he does not want to see this country involved in endless wars, and I agree with that. And Mr. President, tonight you have the opportunity to do something extraordinary. Sign that resolution. Saudi Arabia should not be determining the military or foreign policy of this country. Let's get out of Saudi Arabia. Let's develop a bipartisan approach so that we do not continue to be engaged in wars like Afghanistan, which is, 18 years in that war. So
19. So from a foreign policy perspective, which country is the biggest threat to the U.S.?
I don't know that look, I don't like using the word threat because that says, oh my God, we have to spend zillions more on the military. I'll give you an example. Clearly, we are concerned about China and we're concerned about Russia. But here's the irony here. You got people who say, we need to spend even more than $700 billion a year, more than the next 10 nations combined on the military. You know why? Because that China is a real potential enemy. These are the same people who are investing billions of dollars building the Chinese economy. I find that somewhat ironic. All right? So I don't like to use the word enemy. Clearly, we need a strong defense. We need to bring the United States and the rest of the world together, do everything we can to rid this world of nuclear weapons. And I'll tell you what else, in my view, is a national security issue. And that is, we have got, as a nation, to reject Trump's idea that climate change is a hoax. And, I'm sure you're familiar with the scientific reports that tell us that we have all of 12 years to significantly cut carbon emissions, or else there will be irreparable damage to the United States and countries all over the world. So we have a moral responsibility, in my view, to transform our energy system and leave this planet healthy and habitable for our children and our grandchildren. And by the way, when we do that, we create millions of good paying jobs.
Let me ask you one, because you brought up the question of emissions, and just one quick question for you on emissions. So you think we should eliminate nuclear power, which I know they did in Vermont.
Wait, before they get too far away from the Syrian war question, the guy asked the question about essentially Bernie Sanders and his propensity for war. Essentially, are you going to be a hawk, just like the other Democrats were hawks? His answer, he seemed to be clear on somewhat the Yemen issue. I don't necessarily know if he answered this question of the Syrian issue. I mean, the United States is still in Syria, as far as I know, and will be there for the foreseeable future. Not to mention, the United States is just under Trump, and I don't necessarily know if it has any level of validity or if it does anything other than Donald Trump saying it. But the United States has acknowledged Golan Heights, property of Syria, essentially is just annexed it to Israel. So the guy asking this question is doing so because, I would imagine him being Syrian, he's making this point, look, I would prefer us to not be in wars that we shouldn't be in. And right now we are engaged in a war within my country at a point at which time my country has started to essentially gain power over its own territory, meaning we shouldn't be there. Are we going to continue these wars of choice? Are we going to continue these wars to some degree of conquest, at least conquest of resources and materials in that region of the world, not to mention creating chaos in that region? I don't think he necessarily answered that one, at least in the context of Syria. He did answer it in the context of Yemen. I've heard Bernie Sanders give press conferences once before when he mentioned this idea of us being in Syria was somewhat of a sketchy premise legally, but I don't necessarily know what that translates to in the sense of foreign policy. So that one, I guess, is somewhat a half hit, half miss. Let's let him keep going. He's going to go into nuclear power. I'm going to go past the nuclear power one because there's one on Ilhan that I want to get to before it gets... let's see, where is it? I'm sorry, here.
Vermont, but it ended up actually moving your emissions higher by 16% in Vermont because nuclear doesn't have any...
And other cities are doing the same. But Martha, here is the point. Yeah, I happen to believe, I do believe we should phase out, not eliminate it tomorrow. Yeah. We should phase out nuclear power plants. But here is the main point. The main point is that if we do not combat climate change, I fear very much the kind of world that we're leaving to our kids in terms of more drought, more flooding, more extreme weather disturbances, more rising ocean levels. And when those things happen, by the way, they become a national security issue because people migrate. If I can't, if I'm living in the Mideast someplace and I can't grow food on my land, I'm going to pick up and leave, and that causes conflict. So,
you said, Senator, that you wanted a strong defense, but your
Yes.
plan does call for significant cuts in defense. Would that send a message to the rest of the world that we are weaker?
No. We are now spending, Brett.
Believe it or not, that's a really good question. I don't think that's, maybe I'm wrong on this, but I strongly suspect that this is the question that most Americans are going to ask, or a lot of Americans are going to ask. Not lefties, no, because we look at this and says, well, look, we spend $700 trillion on the military. But from the standpoint of the United States, since this kind of post-war thing, after wars we've typically drawn down. But there's an entire generation that only knows the United States in the sense of this kind of uber military budget where we're spending gobs of money on military in this way. This is all many of us know. So does drawing down, and I guess the question even becomes, what does that mean? What does it mean to spend $200 trillion or $200 billion less, $300 billion less on military? What does it mean to cut the military budget in half? Like, I think that's a fascinating question to ask because it will have consequences. Understand, we have a jobs program. That jobs program is a military budget. And if you stop spending that money is going to stop going into the economy. How is it going to stop going into the economy? And what are you going to do to supplement the fact that it's not going to go into the economy in those ways? That's a practical issue. Not necessarily saying you shouldn't cut the military budget. You should cut the military budget. Cut it in half for all I care. But there is a practical concern that's associated with it. They're asking this question purely from the angle of, this threat angle. If we're not spending $700 billion a year, nearly $1 trillion a year in military, is someone going to capture America? I'm asking it more from a practical angle of what does that mean from the standpoint of the jobs, meaning the various areas where that money goes into to buying guns and bullets and weapons and munitions and military bases and all this other stuff. What does it mean in the sense of jobs? But also, what does it mean in the sense of real world phenomena? What does it mean to cut down the military budget by $200 billion? I think that's a fascinating question to ask. Unfortunately, that's not the question, at the very least, not the exact way he asked it.
We're spending, more than the next 10 nations combined, including many of our allies. We're now spending over $700 billion a year on defense. So we need a strong defense. But I will also tell you this. We have a Pentagon, and there are some Republicans. Mike Enzi, I'm the ranking member of the Budget Committee. Mike is the chairman of it. And Mike, I think, and I are in agreement on this. He's a conservative Republican, that there's something wrong when the Pentagon is the only major agency of government that has not undertaken or completed a major audit. And there are very few people who doubt that there's a massive amount of waste and overruns. You remember John McCain. Late John McCain would talk about the incredible cost overruns with existing in the Pentagon. So we do need a strong defense, and I support a strong defense, but I don't support waste and profiteering within the military-industrial complex.
So we're going to do a quick lightning round, if you would. A lightning round. We'll try to do about 15-second answers.
Good answer. I just wish it was a better question. God, I just wish that was a better question. I feel this way when I'm watching interviews with Tulsi Gabbard also. There is, I want a deeper probe into that. I don't want the shallow question here. We're talking about something that's going to be somewhat significant. You have a bi-party consensus on issues of war. And you have candidates who are in this race to varying degrees who are talking about changing that bipartisan consensus. More extreme so in the sense of Tulsi Gabbard, but even Sanders, to some degree, even though it's not, I don't think, to the degree of Tulsi, is talking about doing something about the way in which this country has been waging wars for the last 40, 50 years. Let's let him keep going, though, but more Sanders.
Oh, I hate this. All right.
All right. So the first one is a very serious question. You said yesterday, I watched your rally in Pittsburgh, that no one should tell a woman what to do with her own body. With regard to abortion, with regard to abortion, do you believe that a woman should be able to terminate a pregnancy?
But this is what I do support.
Problems have accused her of using language kind of associated with anti-Semitism. Can you understand? Have accused of
Member of Congress not to be attacked every single day in outrageous racist. Support a Muslim.
All right, so this is a section on Ilhan. You know, it's funny, when he first started this, he was tiptoeing into this. He was pretty tepid. But it landed on a full-throated support of Ilhan and a denunciation of the disgusting attack that Donald Trump laid on her. I swear to God, if anything happens to her, this is on his head. Donald Trump likes to put off, oh, I didn't have anything to do with this, you know, the killings in New Zealand. I didn't have anything to do with this other thing that took place. He likes to put all of that stuff off when people put that on him. And fair enough. I don't know if you could say a killing that took place in New Zealand had to do with Donald Trump. I don't even know if you could say the killings that took place in the States entirely were related to Donald Trump. But in the case where he's using 9/11 and is associating that with a member of Congress that just so happens to be Muslim, that is dramatically problematic. That is extremely problematic. And ironic, since his close relationship with the Saudis, and it just so happens those were the people that were on those planes. Let's hear Sanders makes this case for Ilhan Omar.
I've talked to Ilhan about twice in my life, so
but you've
I respect her.
Tweeted support.
But this is what I do support. I support a Muslim member of Congress not to be attacked every single day in outrageous racist remarks.
Sure. My question is that even some fellow Democrats had some problems, have accused her of using language kind of associated with anti-Semitism. Can you understand why some...
Right there. Right fucking there. So... look, man, sometimes I get accused sometimes of looking at the world through a lens of cause and effect. And sometimes that gets you into this ends justifies the means thinking. Fortunately, I have a wife that sometimes rattles me out of that particular perspective of things because there's human elements into the way that we interact with one another. But in a political landscape, you have a party system, Democratic Party, Republican Party. And the Democratic Party has screamed that their cultural diversity is an asset. And they've used the cultural diversity to say, look, there's a hegemonic viewpoint against being racist, and we are a party of diversity, and the president is racist. So fair enough. If that's what you want to do and that's how you want to run your party, fair enough. One of the members of your party, who's a member of this diversity, and by definition, diversity means you're going to have a diversity of opinions because various people have various slices of life that they've experienced in their time in this country or in coming to this country, and they enunciate that. They're not wrong for doing so. The party itself attacked her initially with starting from a disingenuous attack from a Republican who had been accused of anti-Semitism itself. And what they attacked her on was something that she was absolutely right on. Lobbyists do use money for influence peddling. They tried to say it was anti-Semitic because she was talking about AIPAC. Now, the Democratic Party turns and attacks her on this and splits the party in doing so because there's some members of the party that say, well, wait a minute, this is bogus. And you have right-wingers that are now using the fact that members of the Democratic Party was attacking itself to bolster the attacks on that member of Congress. So now Donald Trump puts out a racist Islamophobic tweet. And that tweet now gets blown up by right-wing media. And this right-wing media is now asking one Bernie Sanders about this congressman and is saying, hey, but didn't even members of your own party go after her for being racist or for being anti-Semitic? You guys attacked her for something and allowed her to be far more of a target than what she should have been under normal circumstances had you stayed and supported members of your party. for all this talk of diversity, you was able to let her go to the wolves right early on. Fortunately, at the very least from the standpoint of one Bernie Sanders, he did back her up. I'm going to let the beginning of this question be played so you can hear the entirety of the question.
A Muslim member of Congress not to be attacked, but at the end of the day, I believe that the decision over abortion belongs to a woman.
A staunch supporter of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who even...
Hold on. No. I've talked to Ilhan about twice in my life, so
but you've tweeted,
I respect her.
Tweeted support for
but this is what I do support. I support a Muslim member of Congress not to be attacked every single day in outrageous racist remarks.
Sure. My question is that even some fellow Democrats had some problems, have accused her of using language kind of associated with anti-Semitism. Can you understand why some Jewish Americans would have a problem with some of that?
Yeah, I can understand. I think that that is not quite right, and I think that Ilhan has got to do maybe a better job in speaking to the Jewish community. But if your question to me is, do I think she is anti-Semitic? No, I don't.
No, it's not her. I'm saying in the thread in the
I can understand. But here is the point also. I'm Jewish. I lost, my father's family was devastated by Hitler. So this is an issue of some sensitivity to me. So I will do everything in my power, and I hope that every member of Congress will fight not only anti-Semitism, but racism and anti-Muslim activity so that we create a non-discriminatory society. But it is not anti-Semitic to be critical of a right-wing government in Israel. That is not anti-Semitic, okay?
Do you believe Do you believe that murderers and rapists or thieves or child molesters should have the right to vote from?
He started in a weird way, but he ended up full-throated. It is not anti-Semitic to essentially criticize the government of Israel. Now, that's a shocking perspective. From the standpoint of this typical bipartisan consensus on Israel, that anyone with any criticism gets labeled anti-Semitic. So he's going to go into this other issue of voting. I found this one to be an interesting issue of voting also. Pop reality, Republican primary repeat on Democratic side. Yes, pop reality. That would be a good thing. That means Sanders would win. Zane Jamerson. Weird how conservatives are only for big government when it comes to war. They're not worried about government wasting their money on useless war. Well, if it's for war or if it's for police, therefore, in both of those terms, it's odd, right? At one point, they would be for the government telling people that they shouldn't be able to have sex. Do you remember that? Where it was against the law for, anal sex was against the law? Yeah, they're for that totally, for telling people that they can't get married. They're perfectly okay for big government when it's restrictive within the context of people's rights. But hey, let's pay for healthcare. Whoa. Can we afford that? Hey, let's make sure that person who's elderly and worked their entire life to dedicate themselves to do something of value in this society. And even if it wasn't something of value, they were a person and they had some benefit to somebody's life. Can we make sure that they're okay later in life when they get older and not able to work? It's kind of expensive. Yeah, a very big difference in priorities. I agree with you. I agree with you entirely. All right. So let's hear him talk about the voting thing. So the voting thing is interesting. It's this question on whether inmates should be able to continue to vote. Now, this gets into some of the gamesmanship that Republicans have been using. And I'm saying gamesmanship, and I don't mean that in a good way, with them stopping people or people who've been to jail, and once they get out, not restoring their voting rights. Now, you can imagine that if there's a large section of the population who just so happens to have been inmates or have been in jail that are not going to vote for you, then you're not motivated to give those people their voting rights back. And this is kind of the issue, which is what Sanders is going to hit at when they ask him this question about whether people who've been to jail should be able to vote. And his answer was outright yes. What are we to do about the corporate Democrats meeting in secret to stifle our progressive overthrow? What are we to do? I think the first step, honestly, just for a slight detour, is to recognize that there's a difference between us and them. Like, and I don't mean that in a horrible way. I just mean there's an element of the Democratic Party that has gone so far as to try to stifle people who want to change their political process. Meaning they may consider themselves Democrats for some reason, and in considering themselves Democrats for some reason, they want to get into office because they believe they can make a better change of it. Now, instead of having a fair contest where one candidate is going against another candidate and they run in a race in order to figure out who's going to run against the Republican, they've taken the extraordinary step to say if any service or industry assists another candidate outside of an incumbent or to go after an incumbent, that they're blacklisted. They have essentially gone so far as to put sanctions on members of their own party. You don't put sanctions on your allies. You put sanctions on people who are somehow distinct or different from you. The group of Democrats that are meeting in secret, I would call that the established order of things. That's the Democratic order. When Nancy Pelosi comes out and says, look, it's just 5 of them. Yeah, they're using that for optics. I've said Bernie Sanders made Democrats better liars. They're going to use Ocasio-Cortez. They're going to use these things for optics. But the reality of it is that the party, the internal metrics of the party, hasn't necessarily changed and is doing whatever it can to fight this kind of takeover or this re-ensoling of that way by Sanders. And you can say the movement that Sanders represents. What to do about it? I guess that's the question. Ultimately, this is a show of politics. Sanders, for one, is going to have to acknowledge that this exists, meaning they are out to get him, which he has. Fortunately, in this particular contest, he has acknowledged that they are out to get me. But the question becomes, what does he do if they escalate? Meaning, if the assaults and the attacks on him that have taken place up to this point start to scale, what does he do? The letter that he put wasn't there for Elizabeth Warren and for Cory Booker. He didn't give a shit about Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker. He just didn't want to put himself in that letter by himself because it looks bad. It looks like he's whining. It makes it a little bit better when you can say they're attacking this section of the left, in which case you can try to add other people into it. You risk elevating Cory Booker, but only a little bit so because Cory Booker is kind of gross. But you get my point. This idea of what is the left to do about this kind of quote anti-left. That is the question. A lot of this depends on what Sanders does. Because to some degree Sanders is setting the pace on this. He's a front runner. This is not a situation where the ideas that he's pushing are like in 2016, where it's the underdog ideas. This is not a subversive campaign. Sanders' point of view is not the radical element of this case. That's the standard. That's the standard that is to be defended. It's not the one that's to be assailed. I hope that makes sense. It's almost as if the perspective and the point of view that's being put out is the point of view that is being projected by the left. And even though the Democratic Party and the leadership remains in power, to some degree it's an underdog in regards to winning the argument of ideas. It's an odd and interesting thing. It's like you're in power, but from an idea standpoint, you can't. It's like the ideas have lost the validity of the main party. It's like the status quo order doesn't necessarily live up to it. This is an odd time to be alive, especially from the standpoint of politics, because there is a potential for something to actually change. If there was an election that took place in the UK right now, Labour would win. Full-throated, Tories would get slaughtered. That would be a new day for Britain. It's hard to get that across from the standpoint of the left. You think Bernie Sanders is to the left. Think of Sanders with chains ripped off, on steroids, with a little less fucks to give, and you'd have a Jeremy Corbyn. He has a potential to win. In the same way that in the United States, Bernie Sanders also has that potential. Sanders' point of view in this case, he's the leader of the race. he's going to have to defend his position. And in this case, for the people who kind of want him to win, we're going to have to defend him. If you ask us to do, I would make the case that's all there is to do. Let's see the votings one.
From prison.
Good question. All right, this is in my state. I recently researched this. It turns out that in our Constitution in the state of Vermont, for hundreds of years, everybody has the right to vote, okay? So I think you make this division. If somebody does something terrible, they're a rapist, they're a murderer, we send them away. Sometimes we send them away from life. But I also think that integral to who we are as Americans, no matter what kind of terrible things you did, you're paying the price. Maybe you're in jail for the rest of your life, but you have the right to vote. All right, and I'll tell you why. One of the things that upsets me very much is we have cowardly Republican governors who are working overtime to suppress the vote, to make it harder for people of color, for poor people, for young people to vote. So once you start and say, you committed a crime, you can't vote. Or you did this, you can't vote. You did that, you can't vote. I don't like that. Every American 18 of age of older who's a citizen in this country has the right to vote.
No matter their tribe. What if they say the same thing about you, that you just want felons to vote because it will be better for you?
Is that really the argument is that really the argument you're going to make? Oh, that's ludicrous. There's a difference between expanding a right versus diminishing a right. Saying that this particular individual has the right to vote, you're stripping him of that right to vote when you're putting him in prison. Sanders is making the point of saying, why are you stripping him at all? But do you honestly believe, what are you scared of? Honestly, what are you scared of? Do you believe that there are going to be so many felons in your particular state or your particular district that those felons are going to start voting, it's like, all right, we're going to vote ourselves out of prison. We're going to vote that murder is okay. What are you afraid of from the standpoint of the voting demographic? The only thing that you could be afraid of is that those votes are going to be against your interests. Now, you could say Bernie Sanders just wants those people to vote because it's in Bernie Sanders' interest. It is true that it is in Bernie Sanders' interest for those people to be able to vote. But expanding the right is not about Bernie Sanders getting people or that those people may vote for Sanders. It's the fact that those people should be able to vote in and of itself. You're stripping people of their ability to vote, and they're using the fact that those people are being stripped to vote for gamesmanship. He's making the point that you can get rid of that gamesmanship. Republicans have an incentive, a natural incentive to prevent people from voting, especially when those people are going to vote against their interests. And in this case, they've used the fact that those people being put in prison for political ends. She's like, I'm going to let Sanders answer this. Because she did ask him, don't you just want those felons to vote because it's in your best interests? All right, let's let her answer.
Who's a citizen in this country has the right to vote.
No matter their tribe. What if they say the same thing about you, that you just want felons to vote because it will be better for you?
Oh, come on.
I mean, they could say the same thing, right?
And you have done a scientific study to determine that.
No, I'm just saying that everybody wants to, encourage voters and discourage voters depending on where they sit.
One of the great problems, one of the political problems that we're facing right now is the effort to deny people the right to vote. And look, I've run for office many times in Vermont. Sometimes I've lost, sometimes I've won. But I don't stay up nights trying to figure out how I can keep people from voting because they might vote against.
Two more quick things, very quickly. We've been told that the redacted Mueller report, the redacted version of the Mueller report is coming out Thursday. Right. You don't talk a lot about the special counsel investigation on the campaign trail. Right. Why?
All right, so I've made the point on more than one occasion that, look, I don't think people care about this. Like, when you ask people what they care about dinner plate issues. They care about the things that are going to put money in their wallet, that's going to help their kid to be in a better position, that's going to help them in their capacity to work to be in a better position, that's going to make their lives better. That's what they care about. This level of the Mueller report, they may know about this stuff intellectually, but they're only Democrats that are gnawing at the bit to get to the innards of this, to find something to hit Donald Trump with, and to satisfy the fact that for the last 3 years, they've been involved in an open air, open mouth conspiracy theory. The rest of the public cares about other things. The reason he's not delving to the Mueller report like talking about, because he would have to admit that A, they were wrong about Trump colluding with Russia. That's the first thing. I don't necessarily know how involved Sanders was on that. He did bring that issue up, meaning he's backing Democrats up on that. But also, it would get away from his wheelhouse. His wheelhouse is not this Mueller nonsense. His wheelhouse is, I'm going to make sure that you're going to get a better life for your kid. I'm going to make sure that when you get older, you're going to be taken care of. I'm going to make sure that your job, or the jobs that are going to be created, are going to be good, paying, decent jobs, meaning jobs where people have agency in the process. A better world is possible. That's what you get with me. The Mueller stuff is a sideshow. I'm giving you stuff that makes your life better. Yeah, that's I love that. And I love that. Yes, good. Bernie Sanders hasn't been focusing on the Mueller report. I think that's a good thing. Now, Fox News is asking this to some degree to, I guess you could say, diminish one against the other, meaning Sanders not putting emphasis on it to some degree diminishes the other people that do, depending on how you look at Sanders. That makes sense. It's interesting politics. I like it. But let's hear the question in full. I don't want to break this up when I cut this.
Well, because everybody else is talking about it. You know, they might vote against.
Two more quick things, very quickly. We've been told that the redacted Mueller report, the redacted version of the Mueller report, is coming out Thursday.
Right.
You don't talk a lot about the special counsel investigation on the campaign trail. Right. Why?
Well, because everybody else is talking about it. You know, look, it is what it is. It's coming out, I think, to the extent that as much of it as can be made public legally should be made public. I think the American people have a right to know what's in the report, period.
All right, I want to one question about somebody who may run against you. Do you think that Joe Biden is a progressive?
Look, Joe is somebody who I have known for many, many years. Joe is a friend of mine, and by the way,
it's funny.
That in the Democratic primary, we got a lot of good people, many of them personal friends of mine, that we have a debate about the issues and not about personality. So, Joe is a friend of mine. That's all I'm saying.
Do you think he's a progressive, though? He says he's progressive.
You see, you're trying to do that. No, I'm not going to fall for that. Joe is a friend. He will give his point of view. Okay. I give mine. Let the people decide.
So of the 20 potential Democratic candidates, do you have one that you think will be the toughest challenger to you?
I have no idea. Today there was a poll that had us in the lead. Tomorrow we'll be in 18th place. Who knows what goes on? We'll just do the best that we can. All I can tell you, what I am proud of, is in our campaign, media paid attention to the money we raised. Good. More important to me, we have over 1 million people who have signed up to volunteer in the country.
All right, Senator.
Okay.
We're going to give you the floor here for a closing statement.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes. I want to give you a chance to give a closing statement.
We're going to give him a floor for a closing statement here.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I hope I wasn't too hard on you.
That's all right. We can take it.
All right. All right. Look, thank you all very much for being here. And thank everybody for watching. Just a couple of points. I think sometimes the divisions in this country get a little bit too hot. Okay, at the end of the day, we are all Americans who love this country. And I also think, and the media plays not a good role in this, and again, not just Fox, is we have a lot more in common than most people think we do. All right, poll after poll. Should we raise the minimum wage to a living wage? Yes. Should we rebuild our crumbling infrastructure? Should we make sure that our veterans get the health care that they have earned? All right. Should we make sure that we do not cut Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid? Should we give huge tax breaks to billionaires? You know, that's how most people feel. So I hope, look, I'm looking forward to a good campaign. And the last point that I want to make, and I thank Fox, for the opportunity of being here. And that is, I want to see our country have the highest voter turnout in the industrialized world, not one of the lowest. So no matter what your views are, get involved in the political process, stand up and fight to make this a better country. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Senator Sanders.
He did an amazing job. Yeah, Bernie Sanders did an amazing job. Like, if you're asking why the Democratic Party didn't want Sanders to be on that
We're
debate
back with our
stage,
town hall.
that's why. That's why. Like, there's something to be said when you can go into, you can say the Fox Den in this case, and deal with their questions directly and earnestly, and answer it in a way that's credible, that people who are looking at you, even if they disagree with you, at the very least will come away from it thinking, okay, at least he was being honest with me. At least he was being honest with me. God, I love that. I love that. I love that. 1,000 times I love that. Let's see. Balthazar. With 1% of the population in prison, highest rate in the world, we clearly have a problem. What better way to fix it than let prisoners vote? Pop reality. I am proud of Bernie. Pop reality. Me too, man. I have to be honest. I didn't think any other way, though. Like, I didn't think he was going to... Like I said, I was ecstatic by this. I would imagine there's some Cory Booker supporters that's, that's like, hey, Cory Booker, you want to go on Fox News? No, man, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. But every Bernie supporter, I would wager to you, was ecstatic that he was going to be on Fox News because they understood what was going to take place. Somebody who was extraordinarily adept at communicating their message, being able to do so to a conservative audience. Fucking awesome. Fucking awesome. And Balthazar, I agree with you, man. The prison population, 5% of the world's population, 25% of the prison population, or the world's prison population, not jails. That is an extraordinary number. And yeah, I agree with you. I never heard the concept of letting them vote before. I didn't know that was something that was put up as a proposition. But yeah, what do you think is going to take place? It's like, do you have that many people in your prison that you believe that they're going to somehow overpower the voting population? It's nonsense. Yeah, let them vote. Let them vote. At the very least, it gets rid of this gaming nonsense that Republicans are doing with this kind of, you've been to prison, so now I'm going to take away your voting rights. Yeah. An affirmative right to vote. You're born in this country. That vote is eternal. Jackson Wilkinson, raise taxes on the poor, wages are too high. What? Raise taxes on the poor, wages are too high. I think you got that backwards. Oh, gringo. Hey, make America great again, and as done your taxes yet. Trump loves you. I know. Oh, I think that's suckers. Yes. Trump has fucked you over. I did my taxes yesterday. So I spent yesterday, was it yesterday? I went to, I think it was yesterday. It was yesterday. I was at Fault Lines. And I was doing Fault Lines because Lee wasn't there. Lee was gone to check on Julian Assange in the UK. Sputnik had sent him there. So I was on Fault Lines. And it's a 2-hour drive to get back to Richmond. And I spent that day doing my taxes. And, you find stuff like, oh, I don't get that tax break anymore. Thanks, Trump. Now, I didn't vote for Trump anyway. But the overwhelming majority of the tax breaks that Trump gave, 83%, went to the top 1%. And he raised taxes on the bottom section of the population. He's putting that on our backs, trillions of dollars in debt, while screaming at the height of their lungs, meaning Republicans, that they can't afford all of these other things. They asked Bernie Sanders a question about, how are you going to pay for this, Sanders? And Sanders made this point to the audience, you're asking the wrong person. I propose how to pay for everything that I'm putting out. There's nothing that I've put out that I haven't showed how you pay for it. How is the president paying for those tax cuts that cost trillions of dollars? Trillions of dollars. I wrote down yes, but at that point he had switched to no, and so I couldn't necessarily raise it up. That's just what happened. But he did a great job, man. He did a great job. All right. I am going to slice this video, so when you guys see it, you're probably not going to see the entire copy of it. Yeah, I'm going to slice this into multiple sections that make it a little bit more digestible. And I will end this here. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. And let's see, Balthazar hit me at the end. I hate how the narrative of taxing people is viewed as terrible politically. Taxes aren't inherently bad, but benefits should be appropriately scaled. Balthazar, I agree with you, right? They asked him that, this issue of taxes, and he's like, look, I'm not trying to castigate anybody. I just think people should pay their fair share. You want a society, you got to pay for it. I mean, and unfortunately, the society that we've organized, or the way we've organized our society, look, I think our main issue here is, what services do you want your government to provide? Baseline. What do you believe your government should provide? Do you believe people should get health care? Okay, you have to pay for it. How do you pay for it? How much is it going to cost? How do you appropriately pull money out in order to pay for it? And, you know, you can deal with those issues in those terms. It's just that people don't necessarily believe that the government is appropriately allocating those things. I mean, we spend nearly $1 trillion for issues of war. They've just given a tax cut where the overwhelming majority of the wealth went to the top 1%. And the debt has gone through the roof. And you look around, it's like, what do you have to show for it? It's like your bridges are crumbling. You have places where lead is within the water. Your world is going to pot. It's like, what do you have to show for the money that we've spent for that debt? I think that's people's issue with this stuff. If people thought that the money that they were being taxed was going to the things that they believed that was necessary for the society, I don't think it would be as much of a big deal. But I agree with you. The problem is, though, if you are barely making ends meet, what are you going to do? It's like, you know, it's like, what? Of course you're going to look at it as somewhat of a penalty, just by virtue of what it is. You have things that you need to get you from point A to point B. And by the way, there are different sections of this. From a person who's barely making ends meet, you have to get from point A to point B. And you need cash in order to get you from point A to point B. You don't have a huge selection of that cash or assortment of that cash. And now you have to give a portion of that up. Yeah, that person is going to look at it as a penalty because this thing that he needs to live is being taken away from him. And if he doesn't have enough, he's not going to be able to access the things that he needs. Take this, though, to a higher level of somebody with, let's say, the level of Amazon. Well, Amazon is not in this position of the things that it needs. Amazon is in a different position. I have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize my profit, meaning I have to pay less. So instead of it being from the standpoint of a person of, I have things that I need to pay for, I have needs that I need to make, in which case that person is looking at it as a penalty. Amazon looks at it as a penalty for a completely different reason. It's not that it hurts it. It's just that it just wants to maximize its profit. And you have people who you pay a lot of money to make sure they can do that, particularly around the thing of taxes. But there's a difference in those things. One is a person. The other one is just, you know, legal fiction, a machine of sorts. And between the two, that one that needs its needs met is the one that needs the most assistance and attending to. That's Sanders' point. But I feel you. But it's just based on incentive structures looked at as a negative, just based on how we operate. Yeah. I would say this, though, from the standpoint of the 99%, yeah, taxes should be looked at as a different way. And it should be looked at differently from the standpoint of a progressive tax policy as opposed to a policy that is, let's say, more regressive in the way that it taxes people. Degrees in defiance. Did you see Katie Porter calling out Dimon? Who's Dimon? Diamond. Oh, Jamie Dimon. I did not see that. I think UBI could be started open source. I don't know how. Alaska's UBI is a big success. Shen, of course, it's a big success. I mean, think about it for the moment. Think of all of the sort of assets. You were born into a country. Think of all the things, the oil, the gas, the coal. Think of all the things that are appropriated from the land in this country. Why can that be taken so easily and sold? And why doesn't the public itself? I guess I agree with the premise of the universal basic income, but I think it should be looked at in a more organic way as opposed to... Yeah, I agree with the premise. I think it just needs... I like the way Alaska did it. Alaska looked at it as all of us, to some degree, have some claim to the land. And I don't necessarily want the oil and gas and the revenue that's being generated from this to go solely towards a top 1%. So I want to make sure that other people benefit from it. So I'm going to make sure that we all benefit from this resource. I guess my feeling is that should be the case for the entire United States. And there should be a universal basic income based on those grounds where people understand it from the standpoint of this is owed to me through birthright, not necessarily as this is given to me as almost as a welfare thing. I hope that makes sense. It's just a difference in the way I'm looking at it. Would be create a massive, inescapable underclass. UBI would create a massive, inescapable underclass. Bob Ramirez. Trudy, his size of country is relative. UBI done right could fit artists, musicians, and thinkers do what they need to. Yes. Think of what I do for the moment. I'm a YouTuber. Think of the amount that needs to be made for me to get from point A to point B. How much would it take from the standpoint of a UBI to make that work? Like, you have other people who may be doing some craft, some art, some something. You have other situations where people who hate their jobs completely, are able to get away from that. There is no such thing as any level or notion of freedom without people having the ability to say no. And in a situation where you're stuck in a job that you hate, that ability is gone. I guess I'm trying to make this point that I understand that there's an argument that this will create a permanent underclass. I mean, there's also an argument that it won't. It would do just the opposite. It would allow people a certain degree of freedom that they don't necessarily have in our current society. I think I'm on the side of that more than anything else. Why don't Sanders talk about UBI, MacArthur, Louisiana? Not everybody agrees with the UBI. Richard Wolff makes this argument that instead of the UBI, we should phase out working hours. If it's to the point where machines and everything else are doing the labor, we should cut down on the number of hours that we're working while continuing to pay people the same. Now, I argue this is extremely problematic. If you as a company decide to cut your hours less, if your opponent doesn't do that, you've put yourself at a disadvantage of your opponent. It's almost like just by virtue of the incentives built into it, one company is not going to immediately put themselves at a disadvantage of another company in that way. So at that point it becomes, okay, so how do you do this? Is there legal action that takes place? Meaning you create laws that cut down on the amount of time that people work. But all industries may not necessarily be created equal. Like, this gets a little dicey. But those are the arguments. I mean, that's the Rich Wolff argument about it. I've never heard him talk about the implementation of it, but that's his argument on it. And you can say the other one is the UBI. I don't even know if those things are mutually exclusive of one another, but that kind of depends on what you're trying to do with your society. If you had a society that was working towards liberating people from their labor and work, technology at that point will be used for the benefit of humanity, not necessarily in order to just make people wealthy. That reality is so far away from me that it feels, God, this world could be different. We could have a different fucking world. Once again, you twist Richard Wolff's words. Reducing work hours is based off worker-owned production. I'm not twisting Richard Wolff's words. I love Richard Wolff. I don't think I'm twisting his words at all. Even if it's worker-owned, nothing that I just said there changes. Even if it's workers owning the production itself. Say for the moment, worker co-ops. And if I'm being honest, that adds another level to it. Workers owning a particular company, they would still have to step down the number of hours. And they'd still be in a situation where they're going against other companies, even if they're workers owned, in which they're at competition with one another. Worker-owned company A makes widgets versus worker-owned company B, who also makes widgets. Worker-owned company A decides to cut his hours in half because it can make the widgets with a new piece of technology. Worker-owned company B acquires the same piece of technology and continues to make the same number of widgets, continue outpacing their competitor. Worker-owned company A repeals the plan that they were using to cut workers in half and ups the level of production in order to match company B. It doesn't matter whether it's worker-owned co-op or not. The incentives on that are the same. Love Richard Wolff, by the way. Love Richard Wolff. So I'm not taking a shot at Richard Wolff. I'm just saying the incentives are the same. We need an economic theory that celebrates the idlers. Not necessarily celebrates, but at the very least, look, we need to accept that there may be people in our society that can't find what they are in life, misfits. And that there will be elements of the society that don't work for whatever reason. Maybe they're ill, maybe they're sick, maybe they're older, maybe they're not altogether there, maybe they haven't figured out what they wanted to do. But do we as a society say that there's a floor, even in the worst case scenario? And if we do, how do we make that floor work? And especially looking at the context of work as something larger than just I go to work in order to make money. Like, do you realize it's such an odd thing? We don't do work for the sake of doing work. We do work for the sake of cash. Meaning the end result, the highest objective in it is cash. The other thing is just a stupid human trick that we use to do it. So when the person is building a building, yes, you want to build a building, but ultimately you're doing it for cash. When people come there to work that day, when they're pouring the cement, when they're doing it for cash. They're not doing it for the sake of the building. That's such an odd way that we organize our society, but we don't think it odd at all. We think the compulsion in this entirely is cash. Not realizing that it's possible that there may be other compulsions beyond just the ability of a person doing some kind of task. I don't know, man. I'm rambling. A better world is possible, that's all. A better world is possible. The issue with Yang UBI is he wants to pass a value-added tax, which means that it would get passed onto the consumer rather than just taxing it in profits or whatever. He gives it a loophole. Yeah. No, I agree with you on this degrees and defiance. I kind of made this point that you have to look at the entirety of Yang's plan. I mean, if Yang's plan is doing something that is, like if he's pushing that off on the consumer, then yeah, I'm going to be against it. If he's talking about getting rid of like Social Security or something to that effect, I'm going to be against it. I mean, this is all in the details, even though the idea of Yang's plan is interesting. I do, however, like Yang talking about our system as a system. Like not acting as if this is just a magic thing that we just kind of end up here, we're just bouncing around. That this is not thought out policy that instantiates what we consider to be the normal status quo of things. And that can change. It is a policy, not an act of God, that has created what we consider to be our world policy. That I do like. All right, I'm going to end this here. I'm getting tired and I'm starving, if I'm being honest. And I'm going to slice this video up into multiple sections so it's specific and to the point. So if you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks, everyone.